Hello and welcome to Newsfeed, your daily dose of what people are talking about online, from news stories to what's trending. Now, Mikhail Gorbachev has died at the age of 91. He was the last leader of the Soviet Union, credited with bringing the Cold War to a peaceful end. Gorbachev was lauded in the West for his revolutionary reforms, but at home, those reforms were often condemned. His policies led to the downfall of communism, lifting the Iron Curtain, and transforming the map of Europe. Gorbachev was born into a peasant family in 1931. He studied law in university and later rose through the ranks of the Soviet Communist Party, becoming general secretary and de facto leader of the country in 1985. He set out to revive the USSR's political system and ailing economy with reforms. Glasnost, which means openness, and perestroika, which means restructuring, have become synonymous with the Gorbachev era. But the reforms spun out of control. Many Russians never forgave him for the turbulence his policies unleashed, viewing the subsequent plunge in their living standards too high a price to pay for democracy. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1990 for his role in ending the Cold War, but at home, after a failed coup attempt by nationalists opposed to his reforms in 1991, Gorbachev agreed to dissolve the Soviet Union and left office. And until today, in Russia, Gorbachev is still seen as a controversial figure, despite giving people in the USSR more freedoms than any other leader. Many still see him as the man who brought down the Soviet Union and was responsible for the years of turmoil that followed the bloc's collapse.
It is here at the Novodevichy Cemetery where the first and the last president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, is expected to be buried. Now, his death has sparked numerous debates on social media about his legacy and the collapse of the Soviet Union. Many say that he was a traitor who traded the country. He is responsible for the collapse of the empire, and the collapse of the Soviet Union could have been and should have been avoided. Others actually wonder whether that was an option and whether there is anything to regret, as the USSR, they say back then, required reform anyway. We also have seen some of the posts by Ksenia Sobchak. She is in the wing of the so-called moderate opposition, who said that Mikhail Gorbachev was a man of the 21st century. He was not understood by the politicians of his time, and he has become the scapegoat. Anyway, people suggest that it is difficult to make history in white gloves. And Grigory Yavlinsky from the Yabloko party says that Mikhail Gorbachev is forever associated with freedom, whether the country wanted it or not. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, he said, Russians voted 11 times in the federal elections where they had a choice. And definitely many people say that whether he is loved or not, he has changed the course of the world history and the country.
While reaction in Russia may be a lot more hostile towards Gorbachev, it's not the same in the West, where he's seen as the hero who ended the Cold War. Former U.S. President Ronald Reagan's foundation says it's mourning Gorbachev's death, calling him a man who was once Reagan's adversary and ended up becoming a friend. The foundation sent its thoughts and prayers to his family and the people of Russia. While UK PM Boris Johnson says he's saddened to hear of Gorbachev's death, adding that he always admired the courage and integrity he showed in bringing the Cold War to a peaceful conclusion. He says in a time where Putin continues his aggression in Ukraine, Gorbachev's tireless commitment to opening up Soviet society should remain as an example to all. EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen called Gorbachev a respected leader and noted his efforts in bringing down the Iron Curtain, which paved the way for an open and free Europe. She says his legacy won't be forgotten. And UN Chief Antonio Guterres called the last Soviet leader a one-of-a-kind statesman who changed the course of history, saying the world has lost a towering global leader and a tireless advocate for peace. It's poignant to talk about Ukraine today. After all, it was Gorbachev who granted the nation independence, and in fact, his mother was Ukrainian. And when Vladimir Putin made the decision to invade the country, Gorbachev's legacy loomed over him. Putin called the Soviet Union's collapse, overseen by Gorbachev, as one of the greatest geopolitical catastrophes of the century. While Gorbachev was a vocal critic of Putin and he hated the idea of war with Ukraine, just 2 days after Russia attacked, his foundation released a statement calling for the promotion of democratic values and a speedy cessation to hostilities. On a lighter note, though, there's one tweet that's unexpectedly gone viral today over Gorbachev's death, and it's a Pizza Hut ad from 1998, which pays tribute to the last Soviet leader following the collapse of the bloc.
Это из-за него у нас в экономике бардак.
Да благодаря ему у нас новые возможности.
Это из-за него у нас политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря ему у нас свобода.
Полный хаос.
Перспективы.
Политическая нестабильность.
Да благодаря ему у нас есть Pizza Hut.
За Горбачева!
За Горбачева!
За Горбачева!
Sometimes nothing brings people together like a nice hot pizza from Pizza Hut.
There are new revelations making the rounds on social media about Canada's Secret Service's involvement in the trafficking of 3 British teenagers, including 15-year-old Shamima Begum, who traveled to Syria to join Daesh. The BBC and the Times of London report that UK authorities conspired with Canada to cover up the story of human trafficker Mohammed al-Rashid, who was working for Canada's Security Intelligence Service. In this 2015 video obtained by the BBC, Rashid meets with Begum and her 2 teenage friends, Khadija Sultana and Amira Abbase. This footage, allegedly recorded by Rashid, shows the 3 teens meeting him at a bus station in Istanbul before they headed to Syria to join Daesh. Rashid was later detained by Turkish authorities, and his links to Canada were reported by Turkish media in March 2015. Back then, the Turkish foreign minister acknowledged a link to a coalition country without actually naming Canada and called for intelligence sharing among nations opposed to Daesh.
Ve en son işte 3 İngiliz'in
The individual who assisted the 3 British citizens to cross into Syria is working for the intelligence service of a coalition partner. I'm not saying he's a citizen of that country, as he is Syrian, but he works for the intelligence service of a coalition partner. The situation is very complex. We need to cooperate on intelligence sharing matters.
bu çok karmaşık bir durum.
A book called The Secret History of the Five Eyes, released on September 1st, has more details about how the cover-up was carried out. The book claims Canadian intelligence officers met the then head of counter-terrorism at the UK's Met Police, Richard Walton, and tried to persuade him not to implicate Canadian intelligence. Tasneem Akunji, lawyer for the Begum family, reacted by saying the lives of British children and the risk of their death is seen as an acceptable risk by our Western allies. He also said the revelations were of crucial importance, arguing that Begum was trafficked when she was a minor. The UK stripped Begum of her citizenship back in 2019 on national security grounds. Now, with these new revelations, social media is debating whether her citizenship should be reinstated. Azadeh Moaveni, an author who has a published book on women joining Daesh, is questioning why the UK, Canada, and journalists have stayed silent so far, despite the traffickers' links to Canada being known back in 2015. She calls it state and media collaboration in the trafficking of girls. Rizwan Sabir, an assistant professor working on security matters, is asking whether UK Home Secretary Priti Patel will restore Begum's citizenship, given that the UK and Canada were jointly involved in the trafficking of 3 British children to an active war zone. Pro-Brexit former member of European Parliament, Martin Dobney, says Begum should never be allowed into the UK, and he proposes Canada to allow her in to make amends for the action of their intelligence services. And rapper Low-Key also joined the debate. He makes the point that the same intelligence agent had trafficked dozens of other British citizens into Syria. He asks, why is there more accountability for children than intelligence services in our society? She was a royal, mother of Prince William and Harry, a fashion icon, but most importantly, she was the Queen of Hearts. It's been 25 years since Princess Diana died in a car crash in a Paris underpass. Born to a family of British nobility, Diana became the Princess of Wales when she married Prince Charles in 1981. Their marriage turned south and they divorced in 1996. She was loved not only in the UK, but also around the world. She broke taboos by famously shaking hands with an AIDS patient and touch the wounds of a leprosy patient, which at the time was practically unheard of. She also raised awareness on mental health issues and worked tirelessly for a number of charities. A quarter of a century after her death in a car accident, her legacy continues. Her sons, William and Harry, will not mark this anniversary. They have both decided to end public commemorations of Diana, but will remember her in private with their separate families. Speaking last week, Harry had this to say.
She most certainly will never be forgotten. I want it to be a day filled with memories of her incredible work and love for the way that she did it. I want it to be a day to share the spirit of my mum with my family, with my children who I wish could have met her. Every day, I hope to do her proud. She was tireless in her work to support and destigmatize those experiencing HIV and AIDS. Fittingly, her favorite flowers were forget-me-nots. I hope we can remember my mother's legacy by recommitting to those that we serve, whoever and wherever they may be.
Our Sarah Morris has been to Diana's old home, Kensington Palace.
Well, here at Kensington Palace, the house where Princess Diana used to live, people are dropping by and leaving bunches of flowers at the palace gate there. And like when she died, the emotion she still evokes is extraordinary, considering this is a country well known for its stiff upper lip. And online, the reaction is even bigger. Social media is awash with some of the more famous images of Diana, who of course was an influencer long before Instagram, Twitter and TikTok even existed. On Twitter, Patrick O'Brien says, this night, 25 years ago, a giant light went out across the world. The Nomi Girl tweets, she was graceful, kind, generous. She had such a good heart. She made the world a better place, and she keeps inspiring people every day. To TikTok, and Prince Harry's tribute is trending. The last pictures of Diana and her eldest son William are also being widely posted. The caption, it's just so sad, summing it up really. There are no official events here in the UK to mark this moment, but considering that Princess Diana's favourite flowers were forget-me-nots, it's quite fitting that this country clearly hasn't forgotten her.
An Australian man who was the subject of the hit podcast The Teacher's Pet has been found guilty of murdering his wife 40 years after she went missing. The 2018 podcast renewed public interest in the cold case from 1982 and put pressure on police to reopen their investigation. On Tuesday, a New South Wales court found that Christopher Dawson deliberately killed his wife to pursue a relationship with a teen student he was having an affair with. A sentencing date has yet to be set.
Christopher Michael Dawson on the charge that on or about 8 January 1982 at Bayview or elsewhere in the state of New South Wales, you did murder Lynette Dawson. I find you guilty. You may sit down.
The court has found what we have believed to be true for so many years. Chris Dawson took the life of our beloved Lynn back in 1982. On behalf of our family, our heartfelt thanks to all who came forward to speak the truth on Lynn's behalf, to give her a voice 40 years after she lost her own.
I feel like I've even got to know Lynn, although I could never have known her. You know, I was, I guess, 16 when she disappeared, but her story struck me as so unjust, so unfair at the time. I think people who do understand the evidence in this case have the same feeling because it is so immediately unfair. And let's remember, it's taken 40 years for this to happen.
Yep, that last soundbite was journalist Hedley Thomas, who investigated Lynette Dawson's murder in the podcast The Teacher's Pet. It was thanks to the podcast that Lynette's murder shot to global prominence. The series won Australian journalism's highest honor and was downloaded more than 60 million times, topping charts worldwide.
The case was subject to the Teacher's Pet podcast in 2018. At the heart of this story is Lynette Dawson, who was survived by 2 daughters and a family who wore pink, Lynn's favourite colour, to court today.
In a marathon judgment, His Honour went through his substantial reasonings as to how he came to that conclusion. What I've seen, appeal prospects are limited. All
right, on to some tech news. Ever wanted to tweet only to a select group of your friends? Well, now you can. Twitter has fully rolled out its Twitter Circle feature. This new feature allows users to choose who sees their tweets instead of posting for everyone to see. You'll be able to create your own circle by adding up to 150 users to a list and start sharing. Those posts will get a little green badge reminding the reader that views are limited. So it's pretty much like close friends on Instagram. A rainbow cloud stunned people in the Chinese city of Haikou recently. It left onlookers completely dumbfounded, with people asking, is it aliens? Is the end of the world nigh? Well, no and no to answer both questions. Of course, science could explain the unicorn sprinkles in the sky. Weather officials say it's a rare weather phenomenon called a Peleus or scarf cloud. It's formed through a thunderstorm's updraft, creating a smooth cloud that sits on top of another cloud. And when the sun's rays hit the tiny ice crystals or water droplets within the clouds, light is diffracted and voila, you get the rainbow. So pretty, isn't it? And that brings us to the end of today's newsfeed. Find this show on our YouTube channel and do subscribe. Bye and see you same time tomorrow.